Hey class, so for this part of the video, we have completed all of our different variations and we're choosing one to move forward with. So I have a few, but the one that speaks to me or appeals to me the most is this kind of frog looking one. So I'm just going to move forward with that one. There are some other shapes. I think some of the kind of longer ones have kind of interesting possibilities for speed, but for the most part, what I'm going to do is focus on this kind of frog looking one. So I'm just going to go to my outliner and delete all of my versions that I don't need. I'm also going to delete any groups that don't have anything in them, and like this one and this one. And then finally, I don't think I need my image planes anymore, so I'm just going to delete them. When all that's done, I'm going to do a file and a save as, and save it as a new version of this file. The next thing we're going to do is rename our layer in the outliner, or rename our group. So let's double click on it and call it Spaceship _ low. And this naming convention will come in handy when we get to Substance Painter and baking. Now we can go over to our layers and delete unused layers, and that will get rid of all of our extra. So for our UV process, the first thing we want to do is delete history and freeze transformations on our objects, delete any existing UVs, then create some camera-based UVs. Next, we're going to cut our edges, unfold our UVs, and then pack them into one UDIM, 0 to 1 space. So the first thing we're going to do is delete history and freeze transformation. So if these little buttons are showing, just click on them. I always click twice. Or you can go to Edit, Delete All by Type History, Modify Freeze Transformations. All right, next thing we're going to grab our UV editor. First, I press 3 for smooth preview to show you that my topology looks pretty nice right now. I have beveled a bunch of edges. If you go to the UV and the UV editor, you won't get a nice layout. So what I like to do instead is go to my 2-panel layout and have my perspective view on the left and then my UV editor on the right. I'm going to select my object, create camera-based UVs. So if I did have some previous UVs, I actually deleted them. So if you do have other UVs, delete them and then create camera-based. Now I'm just going to go around, and I've sped this up a little bit because I'm sure your model looks different, but I'm going to cut any edges. So I turned on symmetry so I can cut both sides. And if you click on this double dotted part of your UV editor menu for cut and sew, you can actually pop out that little menu there. So what I'm going to do now is just go around and double click on edges. So I really want edges that complete an edge loop when I'm cutting my UVs. Because I have such small bevels on everything, I want to make sure that I'm cutting the right pieces. The top is going to be a different color. It's probably going to be some sort of glass, so I'm definitely cutting that out. The front, the sides are going to be different materials. Let's see. I'm probably going to have different materials at the back here. So all those pieces, I'm going to just make them their own UV shells by cutting them. And then the tricky part comes. So where do I want to cut this model apart so that I have individual pieces? I'm thinking I'm going to cut it along the bottom edge so that I can have kind of one big piece for the bottom. So it'll look like a bit like a frog. And then I'm thinking, so let's cut those. And now you can see I have kind of one general layout with, let's see, a few UV shells. So what I'm going to do is do a test unfold. So I'm going to go to Modify and Unfold and see what these little pieces look like and then decide I can undo and keep cutting. So these pieces look pretty good, and I probably could just go ahead with them and turn on the checkerboard and just check to see if there's any stretching. But I was thinking that I would like to go ahead and just make a few more cuts. I'm going to try and cut these arm pieces or these wing pieces off. You can see because I have symmetry turned on, it is giving me weird kind of feedback, showing me that I have weird kind of dual UV shells being cut. So I did turn that off and then just cut these by hand. Yeah, you can see when I try and select one, it affects the other, but once I turn off symmetry, it's fine and not a problem. And then I'm just going to cut some of these longer pieces off. So finding a good spot to cut is kind of an art form, kind of a complete guess at a lot of ways. Basically, you want to look for areas where the cuts will be hidden. So in the groove on the arms, that makes sense to me to cut. Probably this top piece could have a seam that shows. We'll end up seeing if it affects it or not. But really anywhere where you have a nice sharp angle is a good candidate for a cut. All right, so now that I've cut all of my UV pieces, and I think this probably will be pretty good, I'm going to select all my pieces and go to Modify and Unfold. Next, I'm going to select all my pieces, go to Modify and Layout, and that will pack them into a single 0 to 1 space or a UDIM. So this one piece does have some very long arms, which I think could cause some stretching. So I'm going to just cut those edges off by double clicking them and unfolding one more time. So it's a good idea to just kind of check in with your different pieces and keep unfolding if you think you need to. I'm also finding that there are a couple random pieces here that are like this kind of engine part here has been cut into 2 UV shells right here. So this piece doesn't need to be a separate UV shell. So I'm just going to grab those edges, and the opposite of cut is to sew. And there's a really good button called Move and Sew that will take those edges and then sew those UV shells back together and then move them together. So there you go. You can see that it's been kind of reattached. So cut, sew, unfold, and then layout. Make sure too that you're turning on your checkerboard at some point so that you can make sure that the layout actually did place all of your UVs into one UDIM. It frequently gets very close to the borders so that it doesn't actually fit in one UDIM, and you're going to have to go back and fix it. So just checking those by turning on the checkerboard is a great idea. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do is just cut this piece off. So sometimes I do work in the UV editor directly. And so once that edge is cut, I'm just going to select all my UV shells again, go to Modify, Unfold, Modify, Layout, and that will pack all of my UV shells into my 0 to 1 space. I'm going to click on this little checkerboard icon, and let's see whether we have a nice consistent checkerboard layout without stretching, which we do. So now we can move on to the next video.